It would be CJC.
Okay, you guys have the floor.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeff DeLisi with Orenberger DeLisi Harris. I'm here with my partner, Bill Orenberger. Also on the line, Lisa, I'm sure that you've promoted in, I'm not sure though, would be Donald Stasko, my client, as well as Chip Nyland, our special counsel for environmental matters, and our engineers at Tetra Tech, Tony Amaboto and Mark Negrati. So just give me a second here to see there. Can you guys see me? Is my camera working?
I can promote you. Hang on.
Okay.
There we go. I don't see you yet though, but I did promote you to panelist. So if you put start video.
There you go.
There you go.
Okay, great. So, I was encouraged by the last meeting of the commission. We seem to have made some headway. I think that the commission is on board with the concept that connecting this property to the town sewer is something that is achievable and something that is preferable and something that commission's willing to do, provided that we could kind of iron out some of the finer details. At the last meeting, what I believe I heard, what I indicated was that our client has kind of moved away from our prior stance of requesting that the commission credit against its fee the cost of building the extension in Chief Justice Cushing Highway, such that now we would be responsible for paying that fee and paying our connection fee. So the question then became basically three primary questions, which I have since written to the board. One is, how do we calculate the fee? Our position is that we calculate it based on Title V intended flows, which is what is set forth in your regulation, even though after your regulation, you enacted a policy that deviated from that, which included a catch-all that allows you to go outside of what the regulation says and calculate what you believe to be appropriate. So we think that your regulation requires an EDU calculation based on intended uses pursuant to Title V, which is set forth in Title V, Section 15.203. In addition, I also indicated two additional items in my letter. One was the concept of a reimbursement over a period of time as others connect in and utilize the line. And that's set forth in my letter. We're requesting a 50% reimbursement over the 20-year period that we're proposing to repay the, I'm not sure if we're calling it a betterment fee or some other agreement for payment over time on the on the actual fee, but the proposal is pay over time on equal quarterly payments of 20 years based upon the fee that we agree upon. I wanted to just step back and kind of address what I think is a fundamental issue that I did not address in the letter, and that is, if we're utilizing Title V intended flows as a starting point in an agreement for the basis of our fee, what the concept is, and actually what your regulations require, is that should there be an increase in the flow as a result of a change in use at the property, then we would certainly expect that we would have to pay for that increase based on the change in use. And so I was struggling with this concept because I'm sure that the commission does not typically receive communication from commercial properties in Cohasset when uses are changed and paying increased fees as a result of that. So I'm saying how would we make it work that would be fair? And what I think would be fair would be pick a number, whether it's a 5% or a 10% increase, is if there is a change in use that provokes an increase of that percentage or higher, we would obviously have an agreement that we would come back to the board to inform the board, and we would then recalculate, you know, the fee at that time to take into account the change in use. And it's kind of a convoluted way of saying it, but I think that if we're excluding potential uses from the equation when we're calculating this fee, then really what we want to do is we want to have the mechanism for us all and the town to be able to take into account any change in use, so that it could make sure that it captures that. So essentially, that's where we're at, and we were happy to see the momentum from the board. We would ask the board today, I don't believe that our application yet has been formally accepted. I would ask the board to vote to formally accept the application. And I think that we're in a place where if we could agree on the fundamental equities of what I set forth in my letter, or something similar to that, then I think that we're in a position for a vote to approve, subject to ironing out the language. And I think that we have the shell of a good agreement that we could probably turn that around quickly with.
May I comment?
Absolutely.
So I actually felt the same way. I thought we made some good ground last week. Pardon me.
How are you doing, George?
I was a bit disappointed with the letter that came out, in that you're looking for more concessions. My idea, and something that I would propose to the board, is that and I'm going to go back and sort of look at the fundamentals of how we actually have been dealing with this event over the last X years. Basically, we gave you our piece, and from then on, it's been a situation where you've been telling us what you want, and this is what is acceptable to you. And that's typically not how it happens. We're usually the ones who, we have our engineer based on the flows and what have you, pull apart a privilege fee based on the EDU's components. We have stated in the past that we're not going to pay for the connection. The town has told us we're not going to pay for the connection. In fact, the town won't pay for it. It'll be the sewer ratepayers if we had agreed to do it.
Who in the town has told us this? That's a fundamental issue, Bill, because again, there have been statements made that the selectmen and the town administrator, town manager have made statements and supported things, but I have never seen that. There's never been a hearing, and nobody has told me that. In fact, I've been told the exact opposite from Chris Senior.
Okay, well, I'm not going to get into a debate on that right now, but
okay, well, I need to understand if that's true or not.
What I would like to do is to have, and we can discuss this with the board, is to have a session where we put together a proposal for you. This will be our best and final. And my idea on this, and this is just my idea, I haven't really floated it out there yet, is that we would use the major components of what I thought we had come to last week, which would be the 1.6 privilege fee, the 50% connections, any connections that are made on 3A, you get the 50% of that, regardless of where it comes from. If it comes from the Cook Estate or whomever, you get 50% of that connection fee for 20 years. And that's it. And you know, as far and the one piece I would add to that, and Attorney DeLisi, you actually were sort of putting on that. So it's obviously seems to be a difference of opinion on how the calculation or how the math works on the calculation of an EDU. The thought that I came up with last night is that because we are the board, we adjudicate this, we're the ones who are going to be issuing the permit, that we issue the permit based on our calculations, and that every year after we have a redress based on what actual flows are. So that if there is in your words, if there is a change of use, if it goes down or up, then we recalculate it to that point.
So let me get this straight. So number one, you've indicated a difference of opinion on the calculation of EDU, but the calculation of EDU isn't an opinion, it's a fact. The fact is that—
Okay, we're semantics. Okay, it's a difference in.
Well, no, it's not semantics because we're dealing with Title V flows set forth in a chart that are identified and match up to our intended uses. So if that's what we're utilizing, and then you're proposing to deviate from that by adding in potential uses and so forth, then why would we be reviewing on an annual basis if you're already taking into account potential uses? But I think that we need to take a hard look. You have a commercial policy that has language that deviates from your regulation. Your regulation clearly says the definition of EDU is based on historical uses or Title V flow calculations. It doesn't say or any other use determined by the board to be appropriate. So I think that we need to have a discussion. I'd be interested to hear what the other board members' position is on this. But thank you for your comments, Mr. Chair.
Wayne Sawchuk, and I'd like to make a couple of comments. And I don't know, what I heard from Bill in some ways made me think that Bill isn't, that it's coming out different than what I think that it's going to be. But so when it says 50% of the connection fees for the next 20 years, it is 50% of the connection fees for 20 years up to 50% of what he paid, not have a situation where he could get $1.5 million or $2 million or $5 million if in fact, you know, connection fees continued to come in at a higher rate. Okay, so our plan in the beginning and our instrument that we had prepared to you was really to give him, if it cost him $1 million, he can get up to $500,000 back. So that's my opinion of what's supposed to be done. And Jeff, can I call you Jeff instead of attorneys and all that?
I actually prefer it. I'm just glad it's not a 4-letter word. That's all.
Okay, good. I think the mechanism that I think has been used for increases in flows is when a landlord goes down and gets a permit for renovating, and it's going to say, I want to renovate this into a pub, or I want to renovate this into this. Every building permit application, we get a copy of it to see whether or not sewer has any influence in it. And in fact, if it was an increase in use, and you said, you know, I'm taking out the dry goods store and I'm putting in a Papagino's, that's when it would trigger, you know, a look at the use. And then there'd be historical things, you know, that might come around where let's say it's a franchisor, they're going to be able to give you statistics on this, this, and this, or Title V, you know, will give it to us. So I think that I don't like the idea of having an annual assessment for one user, or, you know, one location, and be able to understand. It's almost like I'm targeting this person, and that's not the way rules should be. It should be the same rules for everybody that's in whatever categories you're in. So, and Bill, I hope you don't, I think it's let's use the mechanism that's already in place to determine if there's a change in use and what the effect is on things.
Yeah, Wayne, I'm still going to send you a Christmas card, so don't worry.
A what?
A Christmas card.
Oh, okay. So, let's see, so what's the second thing? And in terms of the $250,000, I would love to have someone come forward and tell me, you know, who, I mean, it was, I've only been getting it hearsay, and part of the hearsay is that the chairman of the selectmen is the one that accepted it or whatever. I don't know, and I'd ask the applicant, did Donald ask for this in any of his dealings with the town?
He did not.
He didn't?
That's correct.
Okay. So, because I thought it was a heck of a gift. And the way I heard it was that it would be $250,000 and to offset the cost of the 5 affordable units that were going to be done.
I could explain how this went from my perspective, Wayne. The board sent along an agreement to me, a draft agreement to me back, I don't know, last summer sometime.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I did not formally respond to that agreement or to the draft language of that agreement until this spring.
Okay.
I think it was March. In between the two dates, I have had multiple conversations with the town manager as to what I believe to be some of the inequities or the unfairness in the agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And he graciously had offered to see if he could, if there's anything that he can do or have a conversation with the commission to advance it or whatever. He was very open to that concept. Mm-hmm. I know there was not a discussion with the selectmen because he told me. And I know there was not a discussion where he supported or didn't support any particular figure because he told me. Mm-hmm. But what he did tell me was that he suggested that if the commission's at 1.6 and at 1.8 and I'm at 1.4, then perhaps 1.6 as an accommodation for the affordable housing would be something that might be agreeable and that he would encourage a credit. And so we had a discussion about that. What he did on the back end of that discussion, I don't know, but that was a discussion about language in an agreement that was not in the public domain. And I felt that the $1.8 million number was problematic. However, if the board were willing to offset the cost of doing the line in the road, then I think that I would encourage my client to perhaps be open about deviating from the Title V design flows because there would be an accommodation on the other end of it. But the discussion never happened in a public forum. It never happened with the selectmen in a public forum. There was never a formal, we agree with the commission's position and we support the commission's position. There was none of that. And instead, expressly, after the recent correspondence that I received from Attorney Hoffman about a month and a half ago, there was an express opposite, that statement is false. And so from my perspective, there's no position coming from the selectmen or the town manager on anything formally. And the discussion, and where I was willing to kind of deviate from the Title V design flows, which is in your regulation, was as we were discussing, how are we going to deal with this strange circumstance where for the first time that I'm aware of in the town of Cohasset, in a district where there is not a sewer district, somebody is putting a line in a road that's used for a public purpose. And I have to say, that's the other major discussion that I had had with the town manager, because my perception is that, not my perception, I believe that the law says that this needs to be a public line. And the agreement that you drafted actually said the reverse. It said it has to be a private extension for just this property. You have to pay for it. And when you're done paying for it and constructing, then you have to convey it to the town. And I don't think that that's fair. And so from my perspective, if it's a public line, in an ordinary situation, the town is building the infrastructure and taking a percentage of its fee as a reimbursement for that capital expenditure. That is something that wouldn't be happening in this circumstance. So that's, I've just been about as open as I can be with this commission about what my understanding of the conversations are, what I have experienced, what I've heard, and what I've said with respect to some of my concerns, and certainly with respect to my communications with Mr. Senior, and the fact that there is no formal yay or nay from the town.
Well, I have a couple of comments, and that is, I have never been involved in any communication from the town manager or the selectmen or anything on this $250,000. So you're opening my eyes to the fact that it may just be someone saying between 1.8 and 1.4, why don't you meet in the middle? That proposal didn't come to me either. Now that is a proposal that conceivably would work. In terms of if the town put the line in, you know that we would have to pay prevailing wage, we have to do this, but more important, we would have to go to town meeting to get funds and approval to be able to put this as part of the district and to fund it for this development. I think everybody online knows that that would likely never happen in Cohasset. They would be, it just wouldn't happen. Donald doesn't have the best, relations with everybody in town. He has it certainly with many people, but the town would be saying, wait a minute, is this the critical area? Are we going to open this up to something else and all the other things? Is Avalon going to now expand and all these other issues that I've heard from people? So
just on the question of Avalon expanding, I think it's an interesting point, is the amenity to the town in this circumstance is not just the fact that we're creating 20 affordable units, is that by creating the 20 affordable units, it allows the town to potentially, I believe, that's my understanding, to achieve its safe harbor. And if it achieves its safe harbor, and I think Paul probably can talk to this, if it achieves its safe harbor, then developers like Avalon can't come along and jam another 200 units down your throats. And I think that is another amenity that might be lost because it's been on our minds, but it's certainly not something that the Sewer Commission is often asked to think about. I just wanted to kind of expound on that. That's all.
Yeah, that is accurate. The safe harbor is a big thing for us on the Affordable Housing Steering Committee, and it's certainly the Affordable Housing Trust has been aggressive in helping forward additional housing. I made a comment during our last meeting about how important this was on the affordable housing side of it for getting counted by September for the census. Recently elected to the board, I was appointed for the last 4 months or so. I know this subject matter has at least a minimum of a 3-year history in writing anyway. We've talked a lot about hearsay and potential use or potential issues. But I kind of just went and took a quick elementary look at what was published on the town website on how the use was calculated back in 2020, I believe, from our consultant. And I took a look at Exhibit A that you submitted with the calculations from Title V. I read Title V, and I wanted to find out where the differences lie. There was one fundamental difference in the 400 building, in which there was a original estimate of 7,700 gallons per day. The actual is what's here, which is the 4723. So when I take a look at what we calculated in 2020 from Mr. Coughlin's analysis, and I just adjust the 400 Chief Justice building. Basically, we're estimating something like 2,000 more gallons per day than what you have estimated, and I don't think that's a huge number based on the overall project. And it seems to me that it's somewhere around $200,000 difference between what we're discussing today, which over a 20-year betterment is $10,000 a year. And it seems to me that there ought to be an ability here to quickly come to something rather than spinning our wheels over $10,000 a year. The housing is a very important part of it, and it's not so much that the town has offered the discount for the housing, which is great. And if we could, as a sewer commission, we probably should come up with some formula that would be added to our rules and regulations, because there's other folks that are going to want to have a similar discount for their possible housing. And so I'm wondering, once we go back to take a look at the calculations, if we can't keep that in mind, that we're looking at 50, 60 residents being able to move into that facility. And I think the difference really is maybe $10,000 or $15,000 a year over 20 years. So we're very close on the calculations.
Paul, was there a question to me? I'm sorry, I had to go on.
No, I was just making a statement that, we're close on the calculations, and that, the commission does have the privilege of assigning a betterment fee. I was going through some of our Article 10 sections of our rules and regulations. So there are additional things that we have to calculate, not just this Title V piece. So I think that, like the chairman said, he wanted the opportunity to go back and take a look at our original formula and see where we are.
This is Bill Arberger. Could I make a suggestion for a moment?
Sure.
Because I think that we're awful close on agreeing stuff. I understand that the commission has further work, as Paul was saying, having to look at some of these calculations. But what my question is, because I think we agreed almost everything, we just kind of narrow the scope of what this is. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're in agreement that whatever the privilege fee is, we're going to pay that over a 20-year period. All right. I understand that the commission's going to look at the calculations of what the sewer flow. I think Bill's idea and concept of reviewing this into the future so that there's an upside downside adjustment is a good idea. But the real question is what the starting point is. As far as what the credit is for affordables, we put forth a calculation that's only $32,000 difference than the 250. So I think that's a closable situation. That's something that we can deal with. I think that as far as reimbursement, to the developer for putting in the infrastructure. The 50% is great. The 20-year period is great. The only thing I'd ask for consideration is if we produce actual construction receipts to the satisfaction of the town, is that I can understand, as Wayne was saying, that the developer shouldn't get a windfall in case there's some unexpected additional usage of this line. But I do think it's fair that the developer, in light of the fact they're paying the privilege fees and doing the work, that they should be able to be reimbursed up to their full cost of what they actually spent to put in the infrastructure. So I think that's one point that we look at. But I think other than the commission reviewing what the starting point is for the privilege fee here, and looking at, there's only a $32,000 difference in what the proposed credit is, the affordable units. We're in agreement with the 20-year on both of these. We asked that in starting to pay the privilege fee, that we pay quarterly 1 year after activation. The commission has to review that and think about it and see whatever, if there is precedent about that. But to cap our 50% reimbursement over 20 years at 50%, we think equitably, if he was reimbursed for the actual cost of doing that, that's what we'd request. So I think from our standpoint, we're very, very close. It's just there's literally 2 questions or 3 questions. We're at $32,000 apart on reduction, which is something. As far as what the starting point is, we've put forth what we have, and I understand that at the outset of this meeting that the commission has got some new information from Dan Coughlin, which you haven't had a chance to review yet. And so whatever the starting point is for the privilege fee, if we can review it and there is an upside, which we suggest the upside adjustment, if there's excessive usage with some type of thing. So in other words, as Jeff said, whether it's a 5% or 10% deviation, and likewise, if there is a downward adjustment, if at the end of the day, the commission says, okay, we have this, in that the privilege fee is based on a flow which isn't as set forth in Title V under the rules and regulations of the board, but it's different from a policy. If we have the ability to downsize that and to reduce it off the remaining amount that we're going to be paying for the privilege fee over time, I think that's a workable solution also. I don't know, Jeff, what your thoughts are.
Well, of course, I agree with the thoughts, but I do want to add one thing. And Chip Nyland's on the phone, right? Chip is our environmental counsel. He's familiar with Title V much more than myself. I think Chip can talk to the fact that Title V includes a variable which allows, which factors into it, any potential, change. The numbers are very conservative in Title V. So I don't understand if Title V already has a variable to take into account spikes and flows. So in kind of a loose sense, why it is that it would be appropriate to take into account, especially also if we're reviewing the uses on the property, why would it be appropriate to take into account potential uses? Why would it be appropriate to add a factor of 200% to Title V's already inflated and conservative number? So Chip, could you just inform the board what you understand Title V to be with respect to this?
Sure. Thank you, Jeff. And I think that I hope we're not going.
Uh-oh. Chip, you just went off if you're still with us.
He's not on at all.
Yeah, he's on the bottom there.
Yeah, he's in. I just can't, he's not hooked up.
Can you put his video on, Lisa,
Like-
too?
Yep, let me see if I can get you on
Can you hear-
as a Panelist, Chip.
I didn't see my picture, but I thought I was on mute, so.
So
I'm
you,
gonna promote you to panelist. Hang on one sec. There we go.
you could turn your camera on as well now, Chip. If
You might.
There we go.
How about that? All right. Oh, good morning. I just wanted to set the record straight as I've been reviewing the material that we've set that I know the chair started off by suggesting that we were going down our own path and we were coming up with our own numbers and sort of flying in the face of what the commission was directing. And I think when we looked at the regulations, it was very clear that the commission's based upon the Title V design flows. And I think Dan and others are aware, have been around for a while, that when Title V was developed and they changed from the 1978 code, they took into account the variables that take place. I call it the Super Bowl effect. That is, that their view is that they weren't looking at actual numbers, but they were inflating them to take into account variables when excess capacity would be needed because there would be a heightened use or an intensity, from, I say Super Bowl Sunday because that's what they all would talk about. So our view, and I think we cited it in our section, is that Title V already takes into account variables and increases from what are traditionally or conventionally the disposal or discharge numbers for the specific uses. So we're comfortable, and what we saw was that the commission was then piling on or adding on or double dipping by adding 200% to existing numbers rather than following what we believed was your regulatory charge. So there was no attempt here to try to direct what the discussion was, but really to go back to where we read your regulations. We're not looking for any special treatment with respect to how those are calculated. We're just using the Title V numbers, which have been around, as I said, since 1995. And the last point I want to make, which was something that the commissioner brought up with respect to filings that are with the building inspector. We're trying to figure out how, once we figure out what the number is that we start with, then how do we monitor that? And I was unaware until Wayne brought that up that anytime there's a filing or a change in use, that goes through the building inspector and you're informed of it. So it seems that we do have an ability to look at what the actual uses are, and if an adjustment has to be made, adjustment would never be made down, obviously, but if there was a new use changing something that was more intense, then we would be required to make that adjustment. So thank you.
Can I just interject, Bill?
Yeah, please.
So let's back up because I've heard a lot of different things and they're not really, I think, what I try to represent in the calculation of flows. The last number that we have is basically 21,720 gallons per day. The basis of that was basically looked at a 10-year period of water consumption at the facilities for the two buildings. We looked at the peak annual year. We got the average flow for that year. And then that average flow we multiplied by 2. And that's consistent with basically DEP criteria as far as sewer extensions, okay? You can use Title V. You can also use water consumption data in terms of a sewer extension. In this case, we looked at the actual consumption data for the facility because it does vary. Different components or different leases occur in the dwellings or in the units, and different flows are generated. So for the 380 CJC, basically we looked at a period of August 2011 to August 2012. That was the peak use period for that building. And then we looked at, for 400, we looked between February 2013 in February 2014. So those numbers that we have in there or carry for there are basically average annual flows times 2. And that's a standard criteria for evaluating properties that have existed and you're trying to calculate the flows for a sewer extension. You can also use Title V, but sometimes the makeup of a building or a commercial entity doesn't really fall into the, a strict category. So it is an alternative in terms of the sewer extension. For 390, we did escalate that slightly. And, depending on the uses, I mean, the flows that were originally proposed there, have varied. Now you're looking at basically a dry retail in the apartment units. So the two numbers there are basically what I had estimated based upon some modified use was 5,330 gallons per day. You're currently using 4,580 gallons per day. Difference of only about 750 gallons per day. If we're going to be putting in adjustments for changes of use, I have no problem accepting your number as far as the 4,580. That would adjust the overall number down to 20,970, a slight decrease. And then the question becomes is, what is the credit for the 20 affordable units? The commission has discussed basically providing a credit for those units, provides benefit to the town. If they can be counted in the town's affordable housing stock, that's a great advantage to the town. Last time I also asked you if you were going to be providing any additional units, because you discussed that as well. And my reason for asking that was basically, possibly that could be included as part of the credit as well, if they could be counted in the affordable stock. I noticed in the calculations that you last presented, there was no additional units. You're still counting 28 bedrooms.
Yeah, the reason why we didn't include that, Dan, was because our position is that we shouldn't be taking into account potential future uses that may never occur into the calculation. So even though that might benefit us, we think that the truest and best number would be the Title V based on intended uses of the property presently.
Yep, that's fine. That's
so I just wanted to explain why.
Yep.
I ask a quick question, and that's for either Dan or Jeff or whoever. What was the design criteria for the Title V system that he was going to put in for the new building? In other words, I'm just sort of curious as if it's near the 4580 or whether it's more or less.
You mean the septic system design? Donald, do you know the answer to that, or do our Tetra Tech guys know the answer to that? I will tell you though, Wayne, that when we initially provided our, this is important, so this is going to take me a minute. June 5th, 2020, I provided Vertex on our behalf provided a calculation that broke out our intended flows.
What was that number?
And so what he provided was 7,275 for 380, 4,580 gallons for 390. And then for Stop and Shop, he provided 7,000 gallons for a total of 18,855. After he provided that, I took a look at it and compared the Stop and Shop building at 400 to his 7,000 gallon per day calculation and realized he was way off. And I wrote to the board and explained why that was way off. And a couple of things that I put in my letter were, when this septic system on 400, and I'm coming around to 390 in a minute, when the septic system on 400 was initially done in like the 80s, shortly after it was installed, apparently floor wax was inadvertently put into the system, and it caused the system to fail, and Stop and Shop was required to build a new system. When it put in the new system, the Title V flow standards that we've been talking about didn't exist, and they didn't know what to design their system for. So what they did was they took what their water usage was and they just doubled it. And that's how they got to 7,000 gallons a day. In addition to explaining that to the board, I also explained this concept that Stop and Shop building is on our irrigation system. And so the water calculations for Stop and Shop were utilizing irrigation system that has nothing to do with water that's going into the sewer system or the septic system. And so our opinion at the time was if we're going to use data that is actual water data, then we should be using data during non-irrigation months. And I know Dan has an opinion on that, but that's what I had explained to the board in my letter on June 10th. So I wrote to the letter on June 15th and I said, so based on our figures, we're looking at 3275 for 380, which is Title V design, 4580 for 390, which is Title V design, and 4763 for 400 Stop and Shop, which is Title V design. So the significant deviation in all of these figures is this Stop and Shop building that is double what Title V's conservative numbers, including the spike flows and their variations, require. And that to me is why it is fair to use Title V numbers in, I don't even understand why we're even talking about a deviation. So with respect to 390 and your specific question, Wayne, 390, the figure we gave you was 4,580 gallons per day. That was given by our engineers who designed our septic system, which was approved by the Board of Health. So that's that. I think is probably the answer, is that their number is consistent, exactly the same as where we're at today with respect to that.
I was curious whether or not the calculation you had obviously met, and Dan saying, and I forget what his number was a few minutes ago, but I was just sort of putting it in perspective so I can see whether or not, that when it was reviewed, it was accounted for. And Dan, Donald, I think, Lisa, can you have him make a comment?
The numbers that Jeff cited is what we based the system on and got a permit for at the time for 390.
Okay, all right.
And my comment is that we went back over the 10 years, and I think I provided this to the board, the months that the lawn sprinkler system wasn't used. And I got a letter from from Tomasi, who handles all the landscaping and irrigation, of when the system was turned on and when the system was turned off. And all the documentation has been provided to the board over the last 10 years of water usage.
Okay. Now a question, and Dan, I don't know if I shut you off or not. So do you have any more comments?
No, not really. Like I said, the 4580, which they're projecting for 390, I don't have an issue with, really. It's a Title V base flow. If you're going to still maintain some type of observation relative to changes of use, then that could be initial base. Obviously, there has to be a lot more discussions regarding how that is actually transpired, but I'm not going to get into that at this point. So,
okay. Now, Jeff, one of the reasons it bothers me in my mind is that a developer who wants to connect this on, in lieu of creating and building a system that would probably cost more than to put the line down to Bellow Road, isn't he sort of saving money that certainly a portion or more should be going towards the cost of putting the pipe in?
Well, certainly if he doesn't need to build a septic system, then the money that would be utilized to build the septic system would be utilized to put the sewer extension in. The issue is that the sewer extension is not a private extension. Even though we're asking you, and this is kind of Bill's point, I think, we've been asking you for the right to extend the line to our building. And so I think, Bill, I know that you'll speak to it, but that your point is that therefore, it's only really serving one property owner. But that's not the case, because under state law, anybody who abuts the line has the absolute right to connect into it. And in particular, we're aware of a situation with the Cook Estate that that might have them, it might be appropriate for them to utilize our property to access the line. And I think the commission and the town would probably support that. And so I guess, Wayne, to just go back to your point, I don't know what the cost of a septic system is versus the cost of putting the line in. I know that we have projections for the line. You and I both know that, costs are exploding right now. So our projections are probably low. So I tend to think that, it would just be speculative as to what he would be saving and what he would not be saving. And, if the town is also getting a benefit out of this, that's why I think we look at it not from the standpoint of what are you saving, but what would it cost, what's the cost of doing it? And what is the justification for thwarting it all on this applicant without requiring, any reimbursement? And I say any reimbursement, not because, we're kind of beyond that now. We're saying, we're not asking for reimbursement, but the fee that you charge cannot be a tax. A portion of your fee under the law is designed to reimburse the town its costs of putting the line in. And so if we're paying for the line and you're not paying for the line and you're taking the fee, it's essentially a tax. And that's why I think that it's only fair, since it has to be a public line, that our position has been, consistent. And that's been the fundamental issue I've had with the way it's been set up all along, the way that the agreement was sent to me, no one else, there was no discussion with the board at all in a public forum about all of this. And then it was take it or leave it. This is it, no modification. And as Bill said, I think that we're close. And really the biggest fundamental issue we have right now is what is our starting point on the fee? And it only makes sense. We review it, we go with Title V. The numbers on 400 are wrong because of the irrigation months. The numbers on 400 are wrong because even though it was designed as a 7,000 gallon system, it was doubled in size. So it just seems very easy. The town's getting an amenity. Let's go with the Title V numbers. Let's agree on what the cost is for the affordable units. We're pretty darn close. And how do we work this equitable situation? And you guys have been gracious in saying 20 years for the fee. It's I think appropriate to do that, and we appreciate it. So I think that we're really close. I think that you guys could vote today to say, let's just go with Title V numbers. Let's have an annual review, or not even worry about it because it's provoked by the building permit process. Let's give him a credit for the cost up to a max of the cost based on a receipt that he provides, verification. It's, to me, I don't know. I'm surprised that we're going around and around as much as we are. That's all.
Right. May I speak?
Certainly. Mr. Chair.
So I guess a couple of things I want to, just for the record. Right after, Jeff, when you spoke to Chris Senior, he called me maybe a day or two after. And that's when we started. He said, can you do anything to push this through? And I specifically said, are you talking about a reduction in the fee? And he said, yes. I don't know where the $250,000 came up, but we voted on it. We discussed it, and that's what we added into.
Was I invited into that discussion or vote?
Pardon me?
Was the applicant involved? I'm surprised to hear that you voted on it.
Just for the record, I don't remember what I did yesterday. So my recollection is that we did vote. We discussed it, certainly. It wasn't just a number that we picked out of the air.
Well,
and that was reflected in the discount that we gave for the affordable housing component. And I believe that was transmitted, and I'll ask Rod, to confirm yes or no on that. As far as the calculation, my position is that the town engineer should be the one doing the calculation, number one. Number two, in light of the stuff that I have heard and the various methodologies that can be used to do this, I would say, yes, we should relook at it, and have our engineer revisit it and come up with a number. That's what I think we should do. With respect to the line and all of that,
sorry
Sorry.
about that, Bill. I was looking away for a second.
I know. So with respect to the line, I think that reimbursing 50% is more than generous. I didn't want to do it, to be quite clear, but I was convinced by my fellow board members that this was the right thing to do, and I voted to do it. I think that to do it, in my opinion, the town doesn't need this. This is not an asset to the town, and it's an accommodation to Mr. Stasko, and I think that if we can give him 50% of it back, that's fine. I mean, I'm happy to do that, happy to vote for it. But I do think we need to meet once more, just to go over the fee, give Dan an opportunity to see that. And then we would put, my position is that we would revise the numbers and piece that you have given to us. And then we would vote on it in our next meeting.
Bill, thank you for that. Just a couple points from my perspective. The discount of the $250,000 was proposed as a discount on the $1.8 million.
Correct.
And so, the $250,000 discount, as I think Paul pointed out, is only about $30,000 difference from what we proposed, which was 1% for each affordable unit that counts towards your affordable housing inventory. And I understand the commission needs to address that, but my point is that the affordable housing credit was used to offset and cause we'll call it the parties, for purposes of this conversation, to basically meet in the middle, obviously, and that's wrong if you guys are starting at $1.8 million from my perspective. We believe we should get a credit on the Title V design flow fee that we believe that we should be charged. And that was the fundamental problem from my perspective as I was speaking, and at least what was going in my mind. I don't know if I articulated it to Mr. Senior. You mentioned accommodation to Donald, the town doesn't need this. Chip, you could talk about your conversations with Mass DEP about this. They want this to be sewered. They want this to be sewered because of the environment. This property is located in a water resources district. So not only are we talking about an amenity to the town with respect to affordables, but with a sewer, there would be zero discharge into the ground of any wastewater flow, which is certainly contrary to a Title V septic system, but also is contrary even to a wastewater treatment facility, which also has some discharge into the ground. So I think that there's a tremendous benefit to the town, and that's public safety with respect to water quality potential issues, because we are in this district. So I'm not sure I even need Chip to speak as to
No,
DEP's
no.
position, but I think I've stated it. So
This is Bill Armbruch. Bill, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
I think your concept of reviewing this on an annual basis makes a huge amount of sense, all right? And so what I question is, because it seems like the only thing that we're, in other words, that we haven't resolved is if the actual flow based what we said on Title V of 16.6, or is it what the town said in the first ag 18.8, or is it a larger number? And with the question I'm asking, I don't mean to be naive. If we based it on the Title V amount of 16.6, and a year and a half from now, the flow exceeds that, then immediately any additional privilege fees are enacted. And so I don't think that number, I mean, from this standpoint, from a town standpoint, is if it turns out that, it exceeds that, there's no doubt in this agreement, the town will get paid 100% of whatever that is. And so that was just, and again, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but I think if we have that issue, all the rest of this is boom, it's resolved.
it's simple math. I mean, it's almost as if we agree to go with Title V, I think Dan can tell you right now that the calculations that I've provided are accurate with respect to Title V. There would be no need to even have a further evaluation.
My point, my position all along is that, while, certainly other folks, expert calculations are welcome. The board utilizes Dan Coughlin's expertise solely on these kinds of matters. So that's why I want to go back to it, given all the stuff that we have heard about today, is to say, okay, Dan, we're going to put the spotlight on you. What is the number? And
But Dan's not a commission member. I mean, what are the
no,
other,
he's not, but he's
what are the
he's
other
hired
members
by the,
think about this?
I'm sorry. He's hired by the sewer board to provide us expertise, period. He's not an elected official, but he is our expert witness when it comes to matters of sewer engineering. He has been for what, 30 years?
Just so I can speak to it. I mean, basically what we're trying to do is classify this property and to quantify the flows in a conservative basis. And if you're going to revisit this and reevaluate the flows, based upon changes of use and in the future, or do it on an annual basis, then, part of that issue that we have has gone away. Basically, we can address that on an annual basis. But, that methodology needs to be ironed out, obviously, how that's done. Is it based upon the Title V design flows of the changes of use, which is what I would prefer? Or are you trying to say that it's going to be based upon water consumption or water use? One thing that, some of the things that we're concerned about is basically, how the flow is going to be measured at this facility. You're going to have a lot of piping systems. It's relatively shallow groundwater. Wastewater flow needs to be measured, just so we can be ensured that there's no II influences in there. But, that's an implementation method. But the bottom line is, we're looking at this to try to bracket the flows at the facility so that, they conservatively capture what uses would be done at this facility. And water consumption data is a valid tool. You know, looking at some of the numbers that I have, you know, if we looked at even if we looked at the period that you looked at, Jeff, if you looked at it over a 10-year period, those numbers would be a little bit higher. You know, because that month or that 3-month period basically has gone higher than what you showed on your last calculation. But I mean, we can look at it again and give some general recommendations, but so long as there's an annual review of what's going on at the facility, some of the issues that I have go away.
Yeah, thank you for that. And to the extent that the commission is uncomfortable with its regulation requirement of utilizing Title V design flows, then you know, I would be happy even to defer to Mass DEP. What's their opinion on this issue? So if for some reason you guys are still concerned about that, even with an annual review, then perhaps I'm just throwing it out there as another option, if that's even an option that Mass DEP gets itself involved in. But just a thought. That's all. I'm kind of brainstorming a little how to get over the hump on this.
I think most of us already know what DEP, you know,
Well, it's Title V.
Title V or water consumption data for sewer extension. And multiply the average times 2.
How do you get the ×2 part? Where in Title V does it say 200%?
Title V is basically for septic systems. If you look at the sewer extension regulations that the state has had for years, and you know, basically those regulations indicate that you use average water consumption, multiply it by 2. 200% of the average water consumption is another way to define the flows. This is a sewer extension too. And that's why it's incorporated in our regulations that way.
But you're comfortable with utilizing Title V if there's a review that is something that actually is enforceable and able to be real, as opposed to something that would be forgotten and not enforceable, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's doable, and I would encourage the board to accept that. We can agree on the number right now and iron this out. Dan Hoffman, do you think that if we provide that in a regulatory agreement of some sort or another, that that's achievable?
Is that for Rod?
Rod?
I'm sorry, Rod Hoffman. Thank you. My apologies. Rod, do you think it's achievable if we were to put an annual review provision and that could be enforceable in a
We
regulatory?
can certainly draft that and you know, put that into effect.
Okay, great. So what do the other board members think? I know what Mr. McGowan's position is.
After all this time, you can call me Bill.
I'm sorry.
I'm for an annual review. I want to be sure that whatever our final number is equitable to everybody. That's all.
Yeah, I have no issues with the annual review. I just, it's just another mechanism we have to put in place somehow to monitor compliance. That's all.
I mean,
I don't think it's needed because it's sort of that, and Jeff, you mentioned it, that I don't want to go ahead and do this whole thing and all of a sudden it's lower and now we want to refund some money and all this other stuff, and then 6 months later it changes or something. I want to have a base that everybody agrees to.
Yeah, I think,
floor, you know.
I think as Chip said, you're never going to go down. You don't have a mechanism for refunding money. Unfortunately.
Well, I mean, we could put a floor in the provision as well, you know.
That's it.
We can certainly do that, but yeah, if you know, the goal is for the town not to have to pay for anything, and we've kind of come to a conclusion on how that can be achieved. And if we get into this annual review, now it's going to cost us money to look at you every year and determine whether or not there's a fee or not. So I'm not opposed to doing it, but Wayne's position is correct. I mean, we just need to cut the cord. Put the thing in, pay the fee. You have the 20-year betterment, and we move on. So any time that there's new tenants or any type of use adjustment, it's going to go to the zoning board of appeals, and we're going to get notified. So that's the mechanism the town has for us to review any additional cost that may be incurred.
Not the Board of Appeals, unless he was looking for something that's like
Okay.
residential or something like that.
We talked about 3 apartments going above the 380.
That would be Board of Appeals.
Yeah.
I think there has to be additional controls. There's a large commercial property. There's a lot of potential for grease. So, I mean, my recommendation would be some type of, quarterly or semi-annual reporting of the maintenance of the tanks that are on site, the pumping stations, and the flow readings. So I think it has to be more frequent than just an annual review. I think the reporting needs to be done on a more frequent basis. Make sure that the grease doesn't get in the system and the system's, flows are.
Donald, are you Donald? Okay, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Bill.
Hey, Wayne, Bill Arnberg, let me just, I think this can address your issue. This might be what it is, and also Dan's issue, is if we take the Title V number that we have of 16,618, and that's the starting point, then it would be at the board's option, not the owner's option. If they want to review it, or if they don't feel they want to review it, that's up to that, and we'll agree that there's no downside reduction. So in other words, that's a lot more user-friendly, is the board can monitor our flow reports, and if they want to have a meeting to think that there's an upside to that, we can do that. But if the mechanism the board has, as Wayne said, through the building department and other things, is taking care of itself, you don't have to do anything. So all we're talking about is the town is protected if there's an upside flow, but you don't have to over administrate this if the commission feels that everything's going to be copacetic. So if we get that, we can agree to that right now.
The only thing I haven't heard was what Dan's low number is. Meaning, so we can compare it with the 16,578. Is Dan at 18,000, or is he at 28,000, or is he at 17,100? And
Yeah, I mean, you got to understand that, what the numbers they're using are fairly low generation numbers. The 390 CJC is basically apartments and all dry retail. So it's not a coffee shop, it's not a restaurant, it's not a Papagino's, it's nothing like that. It's not an organic meats or bakery. It's basically dry retail. A couple of bathrooms for the employees, and that's about it.
let's say, Dan, for a minute, let's say that the lower level, he's not successful renting it, and he comes back and he puts in 28 more bedrooms on the first floor. That would increase it. by
That's
50,
a significant change in use. And I think, the agreement should detail that changes in use should be notified to the commission. I don't think you want to rely on the town's normal mechanisms, just because sometimes they don't work that well.
Well, I think having something like that in the agreement is fair to both parts. Meaning, if there's a change in use, we're going to get the building permit type of stuff, but the person's going to be willing to.
Yeah, like I said, if we put in some type of quarterly or semi-annual reporting requirement, they can notify us in that mechanism. So I don't see it being a big deal.
Yeah, but you could have that, right? So that's not a problem. But the other mechanism is already in place. So if you have two mechanisms, so what?
Right. Two's better than one.
So are you comfortable with the 16?
Agreement, and the owner should be on the owner to notify us.
Are you comfortable with 16,578 as a floor? If not, what are you looking for?
I kind of am. The
Yeah,
supermarket.
we're getting there.
Now, the supermarket original design, typically when you go from septic system designs to a sewer connection, you use what was used for the design of the septic system. In this case, the Stop and Shop was designed for 7,000 gallons per day. I understand that the rate was adjusted after that period of time, where they actually stipulated in Title V. But, and that was good for general supermarkets. But as you know, supermarkets are evolving now. There's actually food prep being conducted, and even some counter space and some tables, for some of these prepared foods. So that's not just a supermarket anymore. So I think from our perspective, even though you can use that as a base, we're going to look at that number, because if Stop and Shop starts adding, or having those amenities, and that's making an impact, my guess is the 97 is not going to be valid anymore. Maybe part of the facility needs to be looked at as a cafe, based upon seat counts and stuff like that. So, I mean, supermarkets are evolving. If they're not, they're basically closing. And I think this one will evolve in that way as well, and the flow should increase. So in terms of what your question is, the 16,000 and change is a base number. It's based upon Title V. It doesn't necessarily reflect past water use, but as long as we're looking at it on a regular base, that might be a mechanism for ensuring that we stay within the range. Because the key is we don't want to just want to do the connection and forget about it. We need to plan on how much water or wastewater this is generating and entering into the system, because it's going to consume what you have available for additional capacity. And, it's not, just sending it into the sewer doesn't make all the environmental issues go away. There's a lot of evolving criteria now for treatment plants, PFAS and the like, and those impacts are going to be on us. And, we could find out that this facility is contributing a lot. So it's not a problem, once you put it in the sewer, all the problems, environmental problems go away. We're discharging to Cohasset Cove and Harbor. And, there are going to be costs to the commission in treating that flow.
So Dan, just a couple on that. Water is probably the biggest and best resource in the town of Cohasset. Protecting water is not just a benefit for the safety of its community, but also financially, there's very much a possibility that the town of Scituate or the town of Hingham might be interested in buying water from the town of Cohasset. But leaving that aside, Stop and Shop's gallonage, our calculations are telling us that they're using about 2,200 gallons a day. And the calculation that Title V is based upon is more than double that. And so there is no cafe in Stop and Shop. And if restaurants are changing, Title V, that's on DEP. DEP is monitoring its regulation. They're recognizing the uses. And if DEP thinks that its number needs to reflect a change, they would have done that. I'm happy to hear that you're comfortable with the 16,000 and change. I think, Wayne, you might have misstated to our benefit, but the real number is 16,618. If you're going to base your vote, that would be the number to base it on. But
where's that extra comment?
I'm sorry. Is that we were
from your latest letter?
I'm sorry. I misspoke. So
I was right.
My apology. I misspoke. So my latest letter is the correct number, the 16,000 number there. So I guess,
just to interject one thing, you said it was 2,200 gallons per day. There was actually a period in that same period that you evaluated. In other words, that winter month period where the flows got up to 2,809. So,
but that's my point, is using Title V is the fairest way. And that's what Tetra Tech's memo said to you guys. The fairest way of doing this, the best, most conservative, it's to use Title V, whether it's 22, 28, or Title V's number of 4763. That's just all my point, but thank you for correcting me on that, Dan.
Right, and that would just be more, that'd be like 5,600 roughly for if you look at it on a max day base. And that's what Title V is, a max day number, not an average use number.
So Jeff, can I ask you one last question as far as I'm concerned? The number that you've got, the 282,525 that you're looking for is a credit. Is that a credit against the 1,850,000 or is that a credit against the 16?
So how I arrived at that figure was I pulled 1% for each affordable unit.
Can you explain that
counts.
1%, by the way?
It was a number that nobody gave me a number when
What's the 1%?
250,000 was proposed. So our proposal, we believe a fair proposal is 1% for every affordable unit that counts in the affordable housing inventory.
For the-
So that's 1% of what is Bill's question, and I think your question as well. 1% of whatever the fee is in this particular case, the fee would be the Title V design fee. So in my letter, the way I arrived at that figure was I calculated the Title V design fee, Exhibit A, and I took 20% of that, and that's how I arrived at the $280,000 number that was in my letter.
I like your math. You've gone from 1.8 down to 1.81. I'm going to use you when I get to it.
Well, I'm happy to come and examine your finances for you, Bill.
All right, right across the street.
Can Bill Arnberger just, did that answer your question, Bill?
Oh, and Wayne, Wayne, I know I cut you off, but I thought you were getting at the same.
Yeah, I just
I think
the meaning of credit for affordable is 1% per affordable unit. Where does what's 1% of?
Right.
The 1 million, what is it?
1% of the fee was what our proposal is, and the fee is based on a Title V.
1% couldn't be $282,000.
Look, if you're telling me you just want to keep it at 250, if that ends this deal, let's do it.
Well, let me make another statement, and I'm probably going to hold my nose by doing it, but it might be expedient because I've got my real job starts in 32 minutes. If what we agree, and Dan, if you are agreeing to the 16, I'm seeing 16,578, but if it's 16,618, and that's going to come to a connection or privilege fee on Exhibit A of 1412625. Is that correct? But I think it's a different gallonage, but it's a little bit less. So whatever the 616 times the, let me get my calculator out here.
1,412 is what you have.
About 1.4.
Yeah, so it'll be the 1.4, right? Okay. So I would be, to move this ahead, I would be personally okay with the 1412625 privilege fee without any 1% discounts. Leave it at that. We end this. 20-year payback, all the other pieces that are in it. And we could, I had asked Rod to formalize an agreement that we could send to you.
I guess I just don't think that gives us any credit for the affordables at the end of the day.
Going from 1.8 to 1.4?
No, 1.8.
I know. It was a number that we. No.
I thought we've kind of come to a consensus at this point that the number is not that.
I understand, and then yes, we have.
Okay,
But
so
I also
we're
think
working for real numbers, right?
We've dropped this down significantly from our original starting point. And I think 1.4 is tremendously advantageous to Mr. Stasko. And it's something that, one of the things that I don't think people grasp is the just chewing that the board members get from the population as to this deal, because people are watching it, they're finding out what's going on, they're, looking at Zooms on YouTube and everything else. I think that if you look at just the number, the 1.412 is an accommodation to a high degree. And I think built within that is a discount for the affordable housing. And I think anything else on top of it, on that 1.4 number, I would say it's just not right. It's, we have to look at the sewer ratepayers in this town and answer them when they have a question to say, did you do everything in my best interest? We go to 1.4 and then give them another 1% off or whatever that number is that you want to get down to. I would say, no, we didn't. I would say, yes, I can defend this 1.4 number every day of the week because we did it. We recalculated the numbers based on new information for us. And I would say, fine, fire away.
The whole reason you're doing the extension or even entertaining the extension is because of the affordable housing units. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
If I can, Bill Armberger, if I could talk, Bill, just to ask a question, see if we can bring us, as you said, to a resolution. If we use the Title V numbers, we have a $250,000 credit, which I think the board was comfortable with. I understand subject to other factors. You have an upside ability that if we exceed any of these flows, that in fact, the extra $200,000 comes to the commission, comes to the town. Through the commission, we can do that. I think the other issues, if we can vote that, that's resolved. And the only other thing that I ask is, with due respect, is that for as far as reimbursement for the cost of construction, you meet in the middle. If it was 75%, that's something I think is a great resolution for everyone.
I disagree. I mean, I started with 0 as reimbursement.
Oh, understood.
So I think we did come into the middle. And I think that, again, all we have done in our efforts going back 3 years, and I'll remind everybody that this was not the cost at that time when we first met at Wilcott Commons. That was not any connection was going to be paid for by Mr. Stasko. Now here we are.
That was for a private line, Bill. That goes.
I don't know if it was. I don't think we had.
That's a complete.
I don't think we had differentiated between public or private at that point, but I hear what you're saying.
No, we did.
Well, no, whatever. I'm at 1.412, and I'm happy with that number. And I'd like to hear what the board has to say about it.
Well, basically, it confirms his Exhibit A, less the affordable housing credit. We don't have anything in place for affordable housing credits at the moment, so
we do not.
I think that Jeff's argument was all along that we weren't calculating towards the Title V numbers, and if we're agreeing with his calculations to Title V numbers, then we're at his number of 1412625. So and then we're doing the 20-year betterment, 50% reimbursement. So the only difference is the affordable housing credit, and that's something we never voted on. As we all know, that the 250 number came from somewhere. I don't know if it was because the 250th anniversary of the town, or where the number came from, but
probably the most plausible.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a policy. We've got units proposed to the town. As you know, any units that are 4 or more contiguous, something has to be affordable on it. So anyone who builds something is going to ask for the affordable tax credit. We don't have a policy. We don't have a procedure. We don't have any rules on what a affordable housing discount would be. So,
Yeah, once you establish one, you're gonna set a precedent.
yeah, so
We
that's,
have- and to Paul's point, we haven't surfaced it, we haven't voted on it, so.
yeah, so it's, you know,
In this case, there's a slight difference, deviation, is Donna wasn't required to volunteer 25% as affordable, which is what allowed the town to get to accounting all 20 units to be affordable. So that, you know, there should be some credit for that. Additionally, not only is the town benefiting from the fee and the affordable units, but the town will also be paid for the water usage that that applies here. So you know, the town would be basically getting revenue, you know, at little or no cost to it. So that's a benefit. And so I'm just working with, town administrator did call me and he said 250,000 credit. So I thought 1% per every 20 units is probably fair. But I think that, if that's the position of the town manager, then maybe that makes sense for the board to consider.
well, if we're in agreement on everything except for the affordable housing credit, the only suggestion I could make is if we had the 250 that we agreed on as the credit, you're paying us over 20 years. So, the only suggestion I can make is that we credit you over 20 years to 250. So it'd be a 12,500 over those 20 years.
Jeff, you told me earlier that you hadn't talked to the town manager at all about the 250,000, and now you just said that the town manager called you to get that you're getting a $250,000.
No, what I told you was that I had conversations with him, and he was amenable to trying to encourage a resolution to our impasse, and that he suggested $250,000 to me as the solution, and in the form of a credit for affordable housing. And
so
then
that's where it came from then, from him.
It came from him.
So not from anybody else.
Not from anyone else. Did I say it came from someone else?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought you did, yeah.
I'm sorry if I misspoke. What did you hear me say? I just want to make sure I clear it for the
The
record.
town manager knew nothing about the $250,000.
No, if I said that, that was inaccurate. The town manager knew about the $250,000 because we spoke about it as to try and reach an impasse to the difference between 1.4 and 1.8, basically.
Now
I apologize if I said something else.
Okay, no problem. About 3 years ago, Don Stasko's manager at the time, who was going to oversee the construction of the new building, when asked what the septic system was going to cost, I said, would it cost $1,400,000? He said it would be more than that for the system, okay? And the second thing is, Mr. Stasko has to fix the Feng Shui restaurant problem there. And so he either connects to sewer or he goes ahead and he spends a couple of $100,000 for that. So there is value to him to offset some of the things that he's spending.
Yeah, I don't deny that.
Okay.
The one thing I wanted to mention is I know there was some discussion regarding the betterment over a 20-year period. I'm assuming that's a standard betterment with an interest-bearing amount on it as well. Obviously, there's a time value of money that has to be incorporated into that. But one of the key issues is there should be an upfront payment, in my opinion, because you do have system repairs and improvements that really need to be made on that system that he's connecting to upfront. And you're going to need money to do that work.
I think we had a deposit, there was maybe 20% or something was of the upfront, something to that effect, if I can remember correctly. I don't know.
Well, you already have a $20,000 deposit for the application, but
I think
maybe we can use that. But
And the town assessor is the one who controls the betterment and how it's paid under Mass General Law.
But-
is what I was told. So they're the ones who control that, Dan, how that gets.
Yeah, I'm not sure, again, if a betterment can be issued on this. I think we discussed that. I'm not sure if that got clarified. I think this is basically just a sewer assessment as part of the, that's going to be part of the agreement. I'm saying the agreement should have basically some language in it regarding, time value of money to account for the prolonged payments. I also think that, there should be a good chunk upfront, and I'm talking probably around at least $200,000 or so, to take care of the improvements that you need to make in the system before they connect.
Yeah, and if you look at page 6, paragraph 1.4, it basically says the developer shall pay a sewer privilege and connection fee in the amount which we're changing, and then basically a 10% application fee and a 30% fee prior to the commencement of construction.
Yeah, so all that's addressed in there, right?
Yes. Yep.
And then the balance is over 20.
Yeah, and that was in June of 20, I believe. I don't remember.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I provided my comments to the June one back in March, and I believe that I suggested that the removal of that provision. I'm pretty sure that Donald felt that it was, it's a new line. It's built in accordance with the town's specifications. We're required to do that. And so there's also provisions in there that require him to pay should there be, in future engineering needs and maintenance needs. So that's, I think, the reason why I suggested to remove that.
Right, but that was before we also added the long.
I'd respectfully ask the board's consideration on that, especially with the upfront costs that we're having with the line. I'm just not sure if it's economically viable.
Well, that was put in there before we started talking about a long-term payment. Right?
Not by me.
No, I know. No, we did it. Certainly.
And again, I'm not sure you did it collectively. This was my point. I never witnessed a discussion amongst the board about the provisions of the agreement or a vote to accept the provisions of the agreement. So I wasn't certain where the derivation of that language came from.
I know we had conversations. I can't remember exactly what date and time they were on provisions of the contract, including an upfront payment and the payments to the end of construction. So I know that we talked about it. I think in both Wayne and my professional lives, having that kind of an agreement where there is an upfront payment is typical.
I guess I'm asking the board to maybe consider an alternative to an upfront payment. Maybe we can add a percentage into the fee that's collected, just to help along. It would be, I think it would be appreciated by my client, respectfully.
Yeah, I think it's that we're in that tough thing. It's like, we don't know what you and Donald talk about and what you're looking to strive. And so we have our attorney that we're saying, this is what we think we should do and this and that. If the applicant didn't use, and we didn't use the attorneys, we would be one-on-one and we'd probably be closer sometimes, okay?
Maybe the reverse.
Maybe the reverse, yeah, so, true.
I think that Rod and myself have been constructive. At least we like to think that, but I also don't assess myself so well at times.
But when you get something in March, let's see, was it March and June? Was it June? June we sent it and we got a reply in March or something. I don't know. It was like
yeah.
So anyway, our next meeting is coming up, and let's see if we can get this wrapped up and get some feedback. If you, Jeff, and everybody else Chip and everybody can get together with Rod, and we'll have communication with Rod and see if we can get this ironed out.
Okay, so do we have a formal acceptance of the application at this point? Do you know, Wayne?
Dan?
No, I don't think we do.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the only reason you're looking at an application here is based upon an agreement for affordable housing units and an agreement for this extension. And the application did not include any language reference to the agreement or a notice of intent to execute the agreement. So at this point in time, I'd say that the application cannot be accepted because it doesn't address the key issue that allows you to address it.
But can't you accept it conditional on the agreement? In other words, you could accept the application and then approve the application pursuant to an agreement. All I'm asking you to do is accept the application, and you certainly have the right to act on that, but the action would come after the conclusion of these discussions.
I would prefer that we don't, only because every time we do this, we seem to have changes, sometimes pretty drastic. I would rather do, let's, in 2 weeks, we'll have this thing done. I mean, if we're going to agree on the 1-4 number, in my book, the ball game is over.
No, I think that there's a lot to the application, though, that we want to have taken care of up front. So that, originally we said, this is something that can be used in the future to have sewer from one end of the street to go to the other end of the street, but we have a gravity collection system, so we really can't use it. It's only going to go one way from Sawyer Street to Chapella Road. And so there are things like this that should be reviewed to make sure that everybody's happy with what it is that's going to be installed and what pipe is going to be used and all the rest of it. And I'm dying to have the consultants, sort of get going so that if there are things that are predictably going to come up, we have some that might make an effect on what side of the road it is for a potential user or whatever. I think that should be started before. I don't want to go with a backhoe on Monday morning and start digging without knowing what it is that we're going to run into.
We have a draft agreement that's been distributed, even though it hasn't been agreed to by the parties. I mean, if the attorney wants to issue a letter of intent to execute the agreement.
Dan, I don't think that's necessary. I just think that it's wrong procedure to engage in a public hearing on something that is, we filed an application. It should provoke a public process. I think I've explained in correspondence why I think that that's important. But in the spirit of the conversation that we're having, I'm just going to politely say that I disagree with your position. I think that it's proper to act on an application, and we're happy to meet in 2 weeks.
And I'll just state that, an application outside of the sewer district is prohibited unless there are extenuating circumstances which really haven't been detailed in this application. So at this point, it's my opinion to the board that the application is incomplete.
I have one question for just to see if it's going to make a difference in the future, but is the application for 3 parcels of land, or is the application for 1 parcel of land that contain the 3 buildings?
One parcel of, so the property is comprised of multiple lots, all in the form of one ownership over the course of multiple deeds conveyed in multiple years. So the answer to your question, Wayne, is that the application concerns the aggregate of those 3 addresses, which is an aggregate of lots held in common ownership. So the application concerns what I believe is 1 parcel of land.
Okay, because I was wondering whether or not the purpose of using the housing card takes you to 2/3 of the way across the property, and it's a separate lot that's the 3rd parcel. do they have the right to hook on to that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same ownership. To rectify that technical issue, we can do an 81X plan that erases the interior lines. It's to me, it's irrelevant. What is relevant, though, is the difference in the cost of bringing the line to the corner of the to the southwest corner of the property versus taking the line further to the northwest corner of the property at the intersection of Sawyer Street. I've always thought that it made sense, but the reason why we discussed that was because the town was considering a grant. The town had presented a grant application, and that was part of the sell to the grant issuing authority. So, but there's a cost that's not necessary with bringing it to the intersection. And if we're going to throw that back into the mix, then we do need to talk about that.
Okay. I think the only thing that the engineers are going to do is to say, we have a septic system that is at that building that's going to have a pump system, and we're going to have to dig a trench across the parking lot, et cetera, or up the shoulder of the road or whatever to get to the main that's starting at the southern end of the property. So my thought was, if you're going to make a line that's going there, it may be best for the applicant to go down the shoulder of the road rather than go through all the utilities and all the rest of it, go around, stop and shop, and then come, to connect.
So you were presenting an engineering issue, which
it was really more of what makes sense. And then if that was the case, then maybe there'd be an option to tie on and do it very inexpensively for the town in the future. And then someone would be paying a fee that would be reimbursed to the applicant that would make everything sort of be generally. Now, there are others that think don't go to Sawyer Street because we don't want any more development going north. So this is,
I don't understand why the town would not want development going north. It would seem to me like all the properties on the opposite side of Sawyer Street could benefit, and that would only benefit the town both aesthetically and tax base wise and environmentally. It makes a lot of sense to me. I thought it was always a capacity issue, but you have the town of Hull now, and you're a pending agreement with Hull, and let's face it, you guys are going to do an agreement. It makes all the sense.
I doubt it. If you've heard other news, let me know.
okay. So anyway, that was just my thoughts.
All right.
Thank you for sharing those.
Thank you.
All right, guys, I'm going to make a motion that we adjourn. I've got another Zoom at 12 o'clock that I got to get
We
to.
set a date for this?
Before you do, yeah, let's get the date for the next meeting.
How about the 29th?
Good, 2 weeks.
2 weeks,
Is
Tuesday?
that Thursday or Tuesday?
Yep, Tuesday.
Okay. Is that all right with Jeff and the gang?
All right with me. It's an important day in my life, but I'll make myself available.
Okay. I mean, if you have
Do
something.
tell.
Yeah, is
No,
it
no.
your birthday or something?
I'm not headed over to Acapulco or anything like that. The 29th is perfectly acceptable. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 11:53. Bill McGowan, aye.
Wayne
Paul
Sawchuk,
Pierce, aye.
Paul,
10 a.m. on the 29th.
if that works for you.
That's fine. And are you guys, has there been any discussion as to whether you guys are going to continue with the Zoom forum or in person? I've been to 3 in-person meetings, 1 in Cohasset this week. So I just want to.
The town just issued a letter. I know at least it's circulated, but the governor has approved the Zoom meetings to continue until April of 2022. So the town has to decide if they're going to continue that or have hybrids or what the situation is. So
Yeah, I haven't heard anything recently, but at the last COVID update meeting, we were continuing Zoom meetings until September. But I haven't heard anything other than that.
Well, we'll just look at your agenda. We'll make ourselves available in whatever forum. I just was curious.
Okay.
And I'd like to have, all the representatives of the applicant be able to be on so we can see you and you can communicate and ask what,
Sure.
make it more like an in-person meeting and just sort of having people in the sidelines that can't speak or whatever.
Members of the board, I just want to make sure that I'm clear with my to-do list from your perspective. You would like me to communicate with your council to discuss kind of ways of addressing these issues linguistically. It seems like we're in agreement on the 16,000 and change number with all of the provisions that we discussed. It seems like you still need to make a determination on the issue of affordables. That's something that, credit, that's something that I think, you guys should address. Are we at 50% or 75% of the max reimbursement cap, so to speak, on
We're at
other tying in?
Yeah. So the position was 50%,
Okay.
right? Reimbursement.
And am I missing anything? Is there an expectation from my standpoint?
The 20-year betterment was the other element. And
And whether there's a deposit of
Yeah,
the
the
of the
deposit.
fee in order for us to be able to use it. For the-
Okay, so I think that that's the one, I definitely need to confer with Donald on that. Okay, well, listen, thank you so much. This has been a tremendously helpful meeting, thoughtful discussion, and I appreciate you having to sit there and listen to my voice as much as you've had too.
not a problem.
Okay, excellent. So are we voted and can we leave?
We already voted to adjourn, so
Okay, great,
Bill-
excellent.
Bill had already left.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.